This videotape has been prepared for a few good men. Those are the men of the 4th Regiment of United States Marines, better known the world over as the China Marines. This year, reunions, memorials, and monuments mark 50 years since the end of World War II, and Japan has asked for an apology for using the atomic bomb to end that war. This year, veterans of the war in the Pacific will relive the battles for those islands of volcanic sand where good men laid down their lives for flag and country. Graphic films and pictures of those battles will stir memories in the dim corners of the mind to recall the heat of battle and the fear of death. On the 22nd of May, a few good men will gather to recall their part in history. The survivors of the 4th Regiment of United States Marines will recall China Knights and their part in the defense of the Philippine Islands. It was there that poorly armed American troops bought time for America, time to gather strength for the battles to come. There are no films of their battles or of their suffering as prisoners of war. Only those who were there can relive the battles they fought and the horrors they suffered as prisoners of war. The winds of war swept across the China Seas long before the people of America were aware of the coming storm. In November of 1941, the 4th Marines were pulled out of Shanghai, China to the Philippines, where they were joined by other Marines stationed in the island. The primary mission of the 4th Regiment was to defend the beaches of Corregidor. More than 50% of the regiment perished in combat or on Japanese-held ships or from savage treatments as prisoners of war. Following the sneak attack on Pearl Harbor, the Japanese tidal wave of conquest rolled down the Pacific until it smashed against the defenses of Bataan and Corregidor, the Alamo of the Pacific. The defenders of Bataan and Corregidor were the first troops to meet the enemy in mortal combat. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but held their ground until late March of 1942, when the Japanese had massed 50,000 fresh troops along the battle line on Bataan. And across that battle line waited the battling bastards of Bataan. No mama, no papa, no Uncle Sam, nobody gave a damn. The battling bastards were 27,000 combat-weary troops, the remnants of the Army's 31st Infantry Division, Philippine Army units, Filipino scouts, Air Corps personnel without aircraft, sailors without ships, and select units of the 4th Marines. They had been on half rations since January, but they had already decimated one Japanese army, and Bataan fell on April the 9th of 1942. The survivors were brutalized, bayoneted, or shot as they were driven more than 90 miles in tropic heat on the infamous Bataan Death March. These were the men with obsolete weapons who held the Japanese at bay for 6 months during one of the greatest sieges in modern military history. They held out long enough for the Navy to recover from Pearl Harbor and win the Battle of the Coral Sea. They held out long enough to prevent the invasion of Australia. Their heroic stand gave America time to gather its forces and win every battle for those islands of volcanic sand in the Pacific. History shows that America suffered no military defeats in the Pacific following the fall of Bataan and Corregidor. The battling bastards of Bataan turned the tide of war and changed the course of history. The survivors suffered nearly 4 years of hell at the hands of the Japanese. It is estimated that only 1 out of 10 Americans who stood in defense of the Philippines survived to return home 50 years ago. In the dark corners of the mind of those who did survive lurked the memories of starvation and physical atrocities committed by the Japanese. Only another prisoner of war can understand the magnitude of the barbaric and vicious conduct of their captors. The defenders of the Alamo of the Pacific may have been surrendered, but they were never defeated. They were fighting men without weapons who continued the battle through sabotage in the shipyards, the rail yards, and other slave labor camps. Peace has returned to Bataan and Corregidor, yet there are those who insist that on a quiet night, the moon is high, winds play strange tricks of acoustics. Like a seashell held to the ear, the sounds of pitched battle echo through the trees, caves, and tunnels, where brave men died in battle that ended on the 6th of May of 1942. And each year in May, the few good men who were the defenders of Bataan and Corregidor remember those who are gone but not forgotten, and each year that roster grows longer. For the generations of Americans who are too young to remember the Bataan Death March, it's difficult to comprehend the terrible suffering endured by American prisoners of war at the hands of the Japanese. Ignoring these atrocities, the Japanese have asked America to apologize. Those who survived that horror have suffered for 50 years without apology, without acknowledgement, or compensation for the barbaric treatment they endured at the hands of the Japanese as prisoners of war. There's no national memorial or monument to the defenders of Bataan and Corregidor. The atrocities committed by the Japanese are swept aside in today's politically correct view that America was the villain in World War II, as was illustrated in the Enola Gay exhibit at the Smithsonian. Please, America, remember the Alamo of the Pacific, ignore the Japanese demand for apology, and honor the men who stood in defense of the Philippines. They put their life on their line for their country, and they gave so much more.
On this Memorial Day, President Clinton promises the U.S. will leave no stone unturned in the effort to identify soldiers missing in action from Vietnam and Korean wars. He made that promise as the White House unveiled a new postal stamp which honors MIAs and prisoners of war. Well, we set aside Memorial Day to honor Americans killed serving our country, but tonight we also pay tribute to some veterans who survived.
For what they endured in World War II, many remain bitter to this day. And Texas News 5's Jim Douglas tonight on some proud old Marines whose story is seldom told and never celebrated.
Japanese forces attacked the Philippine Islands in December 1941. Allied defenders were poorly equipped with World War I weapons, heavily outnumbered and low on food. Still, they held on, the Alamo of the Pacific.
Corregidor calling, Corregidor calling, Corregidor calling.
Help never came to the tiny island fortress of Corregidor. After 6 months, the Philippines fell. More than 30,000 half-starved troops were surrendered. 6 months of hellish battle, followed by 3.5 years of hell itself in Japanese prison camps.
They starved me, they beat me, they busted my arms from beating. The stiffy guy pushed her and cut her arm off. Threw his sword and went like that and cut her arm. When somebody tells me that they know what I went through in the war, they don't know because I've never told them what I did. They wouldn't believe it if I told them.
They're members of the 4th Marine Regiment. They tell stories you won't find in history books.
The main story that I'd like to see got out is the story of the massacre of the 144 men.
They say Japanese guards herded prisoners into a pit, doused them with gasoline, and burned them alive.
Never identified was never publicized. It never come out in the public. And then I put my arms behind my back to try to keep them from breaking my back. And so they broke my arms because I was absorbing it.
Why they did that?
Why they did that? Because they caught me picking the thigh off the thigh tree.
Do you want an apology?
From the Japanese? Yes, definitely.
Please, America, remember the Alamo of the Pacific.
The bitterness remained so strong for Carl King of Fort Worth that he was moved to make this videotape.
Honor the men who stood in defense of the Philippines. They put their life on the line for their country, and they gave so much more.
A few of them survived the infamous Bataan Death March, a 90-mile trek to a Japanese concentration camp with little food or water along the way. Several thousand POWs never made it.
A day without water in that hot sun, you do almost anything to get it. And anybody that would make a break, run for it, was killed.
They say this Japanese propaganda film does not show life as it really was. American prisoners forced into slave labor actually maimed themselves to keep from being worked and starved to death.
Anyway, he had a little deal where they put the arm and two braces here, and he had himself a steel ball, and whammo, he'd come down and break the arm.
This is how the lucky ones looked when they were finally liberated. Now they carry the paunch of old age. On this night, they put aside their anger to revel in joyous reunion. Some haven't seen each other since they were captured.
They hugged and cried, and they just thrilled to death to see.
Their numbers grow smaller each year. The ones who died are honored with a table all their own. Their stubborn struggle for the Philippines at the beginning of World War II was not a lost cause. It bought America enough time to recover from Pearl Harbor and smash the Japanese. 50 years later, the 4th Regiment of the United States Marine Corps remains a proud unit.
We are proud to win the title of United States Marines. God bless Marines. Hurrah!
Jim Douglas, Texas News 5.
And that is an elite group. The 4th Marines made up only a small portion of the U.S. forces captured in the Philippines. Most of the POWs were in the Army.
Su Chow, the 4th Marine mascot of Shanghai, who survived the combat of Bataan and Corregidor and prison camp, along with his other fellow Marines, now buried under this monument at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego. At our reunion in San Diego several years ago, we were honored with the official parade and review as presented by the recruits graduating from the Marine Corps Recruit Depot at that time. Guests of the 4th Regiment reunion at San Diego. And then it was so long to San Diego, Phoenix. These 5 gentlemen were all in the same prison camp, Yokohama, working in the Mitsubishi shipyard. Before we went to Phoenix, we had a reunion at Camp Pendleton, the wonderful new training base for firepower. And some of the firepower we witnessed while we were there, only we'd had it on Corregidor and Bataan. The pictures that we have here, I believe there were probably more men visited Camp Pendleton and our reunion than any of the other reunions that I've had the pleasure of attending.
Lincoln serial number.
Welcome to the 4th Marine Banquet 1990. A lot of smiling faces out there. I'm delighted to be up here looking at your faces and your nice smiles, lovely ladies, and old jarhead Marines. I'm reminded of China and the old days. You know, we left a way of life behind us when we left Shanghai and we left China. We left a real special way of life behind. And we had one hell of a way of life awaiting us when we arrived in the Philippines. We'll allude to that from time to time as the evening progresses. We've got a lot of things to cover, and I want to be sure that we get the program covered completely. So, without further ado, I'm going to ask the group to please rise for the posting of the colors. Please rise. Post the colors. Raise hand. Color. Order. Color. All wood. Out. Raise in. Up. And loose. Ready? Out. Out. Oh, foul. All wood. Out. All wood. Out.
So that you Marines that have been down there sometime would know what you have been in store for had you made an escape. So like all the Marines that were on Palawan Island, anytime, please stand for me, please. I think all of us that were down at Puerto Princesa, Palawan, have seen many and many things happen down that there atrocity camp that aren't for man to believe. On that fateful day, December 14, 1944, 150 of us were left. And about noon, they sounded air raids. And of course, early in the day, we could see the troops moving out. We knew things were about to happen. As you all know, we all learned a little bit of Japanese. We knew that they landed on Tacloban, Leyte, and we knew that morning that there was a convoy that left Leyte. The Japanese were all huddled, fully armed, and we could tell that things were getting real close. We've been going under bombardments by our Air Force, and so most of us knew that time was coming that we were going to be liberated. However, on this fateful day, December 14th, about noon, they sounded air raids. Then shortly thereafter, they all cleared. Next thing we noticed, the Japanese commander, he got in his little pedestal, And he announced to us, he says, Americans, your working days are over. And they did, and we thought to ourselves, thank God for coming in after. So they marched us back to the prison camp, and got in the prison camp. Air raid sounded again. Hurry, hurry, get down in the trenches. Most of us forgot these trenches, because we knew that the Japanese were all excited. We noticed all around the prison camp machine guns lined up all around this prison camp. And the next thing we noticed, there was a platoon of Japanese. Came down through the barracks, carrying buckets and torches. The next thing we could hear was screaming and bombing, explosions, machine guns shattering, and all hell broke loose. Smitty and my brother Smith, our names are a little different, Joel and Smith, but I think we're closer than brothers. We bolted out of this here trench, down over the cliff. Smitty shook hands with me and said, Joel, I'll see you. And we started running down the beach, machine guns opened up on us and stood us. Next thing I could see old Smitty's heels going down the beach. I had to turn around and get him back. 2 days I spent it, praying to God, give me the strength, give me the strength. Thinking I was the only one. As time went on, we made this swim across the big channel, and then we were picked up by the Philippines. We were taken to the southern part of Palawan Island to a place called Brooks Point. 9 of us had made it to this point. 2 others have made their escape, so 11 out of 150 made the escape out of us to the cross the camp. When we arrived down at Brooks Point, we ran into a Captain Nazario B. Mayhaw. I came down from Malaria. And I'll never forget, laying on this little bamboo cot, shaking, a little girl, about 7 years old, would look around the corner and ask me if I needed some water. I'd say yes. She'd go get me the water. And unbeknown to us, we were eating food, and chicken we had, that these little children never did have. We were eating good food. And for all you good people and good Marines, I'd like to introduce to you this little girl, Mary Ann Mayhar, and her son, Mike.
Departure has not previously been reported. They are gone, but their memories live on in our hearts. Jack Ross, James E. Robinson, John E. Bookman, Eldon Strickland, James H. Harris, William O. Hicks, Walter C. Johnson, Don Armstrong, Elby McDaniel, Albert J. Tyler, Michael A. Trupiano, Eugene Garrett, William D. Swift, James J. Fitt, Edwin J. Orgeron, Andy Anderson, Evan F. Flunn, Bill McCormick, Herbert O. Mertes, Samuel Ogunabama, John L. Rogers Jr., Thomas E. Collins, Robert A. Ferguson, Joseph Andrews, Alfred F. Myers, Glenn M. Phillips, Byron Stockwell, Seymour F. Parker, Wilson Billy G. Reed, George Damos, Alex N. Jones, William G. Mix, Frank W. Bird, Maurice E. Gerard, Bernard C. Emmett, Chester M. Kakubazak, Jack D. Thompson, Melvin John Zoller, Frank W. Price Jr., Frank O. Crum, Raymond E. Smith, Leland M. Andrews, Herman O. Carpenter, Edward H. Howe, Richard Sanders, William P. Smith, Vernon G. Holt, Morris Johnson, Cecil C. Pickett, Louis F. Woodland, Jess L. Petticoat. Day is done, gone the sun. From the lake, from the hills, from the sky, all is well, rest in peace, God is nigh.
Name, rank, and serial number.
We need tape. My God. Hope my wife doesn't see me drinking.
I had a real good contact just like that. And to dispose of their bodies and everything that they did. So,
There they are looking this way.
Got him.
He got you? Hi, King. Hi. I'm going to find out that. For about an hour. It hasn't been that many. I bet you're over see you later.
Yeah, they never much made it. Just the way it cost them. He bought that of them. Just the same. It cost him $15 after the sale.
it's nice to have.
Nice to have.
Me too.
I was there. I still know mine.
The place is filling up. He and I were in a band together. When I first had taken
It's in that general area. There's a note right on the door. Mr. Burlage, thank you. I report you that people in Fort Worth I think it's calling me, guys. Tell them no, you want me? Pretty good. Your man's attitude, you believe this. I don't want to put him on your shit. Then they agree. Paperwork, inventory,
You want to bet on that?
He's not checked out that thing.
When's the last time you drove somebody to the spaghetti warehouse while you were drunk?
Well, Senator, I'd like to go right now.
San Diego?
No, here.
We just had lunch.
They got one here. They got one here.
That car to bed, turned around, a lot of them just made them trips. This morning, come on back and got up.
Otis, what in the world's going on? Getting a few foot of film or tape to remember you guys by?
Oh, we got albums at home, and live, the world. It's not quick.
Rufus? Rufus!
Not the size, the other one. I'll see. I will go back. I got promoted. How about this 88 they did? Where were you in the office? Or?
Did you get the clown shoes?
Yeah, I know, but so was I. I was in Costello's squad. Yeah, Jimmy Costello. Benefit. He was a sergeant in there, wasn't he? I don't remember. But there was that squad that I was in at Costello. No, Northern First.
This is retired Brigadier General Schaffner, who served time in Shanghai with the 4th Marines, and as I understand, made an escape and survived and stayed in the Marine Corps to become general, Brigadier General.
What happened? Nobody told me that was nobody told me that you were moving.
I guess so. Yeah. So we left alone.
We had young Duncan who had that they go to 25, 26,000 feet. We got there with big 3-inch pistols, which is going to 12,000 feet. When this thing comes over, they're up there 25, we're 12,000 feet. We gave them a scream. We didn't get scared. So we had some 23s. And then he was, I don't know what kind of grapes got against them. Who's going to get them? I guess they were telling me, you know, we can get them.
You know, if we had started this war in the Middle East, the way they started in the Philippines, we'd be over there right now ruling turkeys.
Everybody called. I know. They all said, that's all I know. What's he doing?
Taking a picture.
I just came down.
Is he coming to the dinner tonight?
Oh, yeah. No.
We wanted to introduce you Would you have something? I can't help. You might something to build.
My wife and I recently made a tour of the Caribbean, and on that tour we met a couple from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and They gave us some information about the state of Tennessee, and I'll share what the wife told us about the Civil War. During the Civil War, as the Battle of Chattanooga was winding down, I asked the lady if she had room for how many troops that she could accommodate for lodging, and she said, well, only one. So the lieutenant said, okay, Peters, since you've got a wounded leg, you stay here. Then he took the rest of the troops, started marching down the street, and they came to this large house in Chattanooga. And he, not knowing it was the house of ill repute, marched right up, knocked on the door. The madam answered the door, and she was standing there, and he said, I've got some troops here. We need a place. We want to come in. We want to spend the night. And she said, well, how many men do you have? And he says, count the sergeant, count them up. How many we got? And the sergeant went through and counted. He said, we've got 17 without Peters. And she said, my God, I don't believe it. Now, there was also a sergeant that made a living with the Civil War. He was a tour leader, a tour guide. He drove a bus, and a lot of the people that came down to Virginia to the Battle of Manassas and a lot of the other sides of the battles of the Civil War, well, he was an old Southerner, dyed-in-the-wool Southerner. And when he got people in his bus, well, he would take them along and give them the Southern version of the Civil War. And on one particular trip, he had a group from Boston. And as he went along, he would say, here was the battle that so-and-so fought, and then that's where the rebels kicked the Yankees. Over here, another battle, the rebels kicked the Yankees, and that was the tenure of the tour. Finally, this lady from Boston, she said, well, just a moment. Didn't the rebels ever win a war or a battle down here? And he says, not as long as I'm in charge of this damn tour. Excuse me, the boss wants me. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce Sergeant Grimes, and he will introduce the members of the color guard, and then we'll give them a hand. Thank you. sitting so much, you're going to understand a little bit. Koenig, would you come forward? He's the only atheist we got, so he's leading us in the invocation.
Well, you remembered that when I said that the other day, didn't you? Very well. I'm reading that. Ladies and gentlemen, may I resume? Dear God, bless this group assembled herein, guide us in our daily endeavors, help us to maintain our dignity in our waning years, help us to achieve tranquility and peace of mind. We thank you, God, for assisting America to achieve its present state of high esteem throughout the world. And for the deliverance of our armed forces from quagmire and the disgrace of Vietnam. God bless our president, God bless our armed forces, and God bless America. Thank you.
Please be seated, enjoy your dinner, and we'll proceed later. Thank you. I mentioned this at our last meeting, and it's worth mentioning again. In Shanghai, we had a Navy doctor, honest Indian. You could go in there with an ingrowing hair, an ingrowing toenail, flat feet, it didn't matter, and he wanted to circumcise you. True. This guy was unreal. I remember Smokey Howard. Some of you remember Sergeant Howard, Smokey Howard? One day he says, I wonder what the hell he's doing with him, putting them in a suit? But I'm going to tell you a story about this guy that went to a Navy doctor. He couldn't get his headache cured. He goes to another Navy doctor, he couldn't get his headache cured. And he was talking to this corpsman. The corpsman said, what is your problem? He said, I don't know. He said, I got this damn headache, I can't get rid of it. So the corpsman says, I had the same thing. I think I have a solution for you. And the guy said, I wish you could tell me. He says, I'm getting desperate. So the corpsman said, I had the same thing. And what I did, I went home, I got my wife to take her bra off, and I put my nose right on the cleavage, and I just rested my head on her chest, and I just relaxed completely, and my headache disappeared. No headache at all. The guy said, you still okay? He said, yeah, I haven't had a headache since. He said, I would recommend that to you. Why don't you do that? He said, I'm going to try it. Oh, a couple of weeks later, he ran into this corpsman, and the corpsman said, how you doing? How about your headache? He said, it worked perfectly. The only thing that I can say is you ought to change your bedroom furniture. I'd like for any corpsman that's in our midst to stand up for recognition. Any corpsman in this midst, stand up for recognition. Give him a hand. Give him a hand. Give him a hand. These guys did one heck of a job and still do it. The traditional Corps and the Navy, they are great guys, and we Marines, we love you. And thank you very much for what you did in the past and what you may do in the future. I would like at this time for the survivors of Palawan to stand up for a hand. The survivors of Palawan, why don't you stand up so we can take a hand here? Come on, get up over your dock. I'm going to ask Rufus Smith to continue standing. Would you please stand up, Rufus Smith? Get up, Rufus. I'm going to... Okay. I want to tell you about Rufus Smith. He's one of the survivors of the massacre of Palawan in 1944 when they doused the prisoners with gasoline. 150 of them. They doused them with gasoline, the Japs did, and torched them. 11 men escaped. And that gentleman that you see back there is one of the survivors. They got out and got into the jungle and managed to get over to the guerrillas and got out of that massacre. Give him a good hand. anyone here who has a guest that they would like to introduce, to please make it known at this time. Anyone with a guest that you would like to introduce, please stand up. Okay. Would you speak a little louder where they can hear you? Stand up, please. Stand up. Give them a hand. Give them a hand. Welcome aboard. We're glad to have you here. Glad to have you. Yes.
I'm a good friend from Hong Kong, who was captured in Hong Kong. We were together in Kobe Hospital. Jack Houston, his wife Pat.
Please stand up and welcome. Welcome to our group. Welcome. We have someone over here. Stand up, David. Give him a hand. Give him a hand. Welcome, David. Welcome. Do we have any other visitors? Yes. Yes, sir. Give him a hand. Please stand up. Please stand up. Any other visitors? Yes, please. Please stand up for recognition. Where is she? Oh, here he is. Give him a hand. Give him a hand.
I don't mean to take over the show here, but my uncle wrote a book, and in it I'd like to read his dedication, if you don't mind. To the 4th Marines, to the Marines of the old 4th Regiment of Shanghai, who played their grand finale on Corregidor, men with whom it was a great honor to cast my lot. Gentlemen, I salute each and every one of you. I'm very damn proud. Thank you.
I'd like to have, who is he? Who is he? How? Hey, how old? How old? Hold it. How old are you? 84. Hey, give him a hand. Give him a hand. We'd like to recognize the person that's traveled the greatest distance south. Who thinks that they came from the greatest distance? Yes, how far? Hong Kong. Stand up from Hong Kong. Give them a hand here. There you go. Wonderful. Okay. Is there someone in it that has a letter from Ted that they said they would read? A letter from Ted. Ted Williams. Someone said they had a letter from Ted Williams, and I told them that I would give them some mic time. Oh, okay. Well, we'll pass that one by. We have a doggy, he's not here tonight, but we have a doggy who's been trying to get in the Marines for a long time. Bill Evans, heck of a nice guy. He wrote the book, Sioux Chow. That's the 4-legged Marine that survived the war years, or the war days and months, and survived prison camp, got back to the States, he was buried when he passed away in San Diego, was buried with full honors. The dog Sioux Chow, the Shanghai Massacre, the 1st Battalion. And this guy wrote the book. He became fascinated with Sioux Chow, and he wrote a nice book about Sioux Chow. Bill Evans. And he wrote this letter.
Seems like a typhoon came along, and there's a 2-room schoolhouse, and now they only have 1 room left. Big part? Oh, sorry. I think we had bad luck this year in that a typhoon hit the island full force, and out of the 2 rooms in the school, we only have 1 left. We sent something like $300-400 to make patch up the room, but it's not going to work. It's going to have a whole new roof and a few other things. So this year, we would really appreciate if you could dig a little deeper, and we will try to get the school back into full swing again. There were 40 pupils in the school this year, and frankly, all of you can take a bow because the school is now pointed out as a point of interest on
Corregidor. And I get donations from people all over the country who just heard about it and wanted to be contributors to such a worthwhile project. They're $5 a piece, and $2 of that goes to the school. It costs $3 to get a patch fitted. And you can buy as many as you want. I brought 50 with me. So I'm sitting over at that table over there. One of them, let me know. Every once in a while, you know, you get a chance to really
Pat?
Can you read this? It says USMC, American Professional Killing Team. I bet there's a lot of Iraqis who agree with that. Thank you.
I can't wait. Can you give me a hand down there for arranging for color guard and all that? He said, sure. The guy's been so cooperative. He even furnished a car to haul the booze for you boozers. He's been a real contributor to our hospitality room. Give him a hand. Ray Collins. And he's been a bartender par excellence right along. Joe Romanelli, always available to give a hand. And Marty Christie, poor old guy, we got him working too. He came in here with a rented car and he's been hauling booze. Marty Christie over there. Have I missed any of the other guys that worked on the booze? Well, Paula Boswell, my lovely wife, please stand up. Give her a nice hand. Would you please come up and introduce those who helped you in the registration? Come up to the mic, Paula. You can't get off the hook. You've been giving me a bad time about my jokes. What joke? Can't hear you, Paula.
Yeah, what was that? Introverted, and all of those things. And that's all the bad baggage that we're carrying we brought out of the prison camps. There's a damn thing you can do about that. You've had it, you live with it, try to make the best of it. But I think that the people that have gone unrecognized is our families, our wives and our children. They too are carrying some bad baggage and we're in. I think for years we didn't recognize what they were going through. I think we do now. They were a lot kinder, a lot more thoughtful to our families and our wives, and it's a good thing.
Wait a minute, Matt.
Yeah?
Margaret to take care of all the situation.
Pardon me?
We need Margaret to take care of it.
What, who?
Margaret.
Who is Clubbook Margaret? I went to community singing to the church when I was in Shanghai. What the hell you guys are doing? Clubbook Margaret indeed. Something else, a serious note, is that when you people send checks into me for the banquet, almost everyone has a note attached. Some people, like Benny Loman, will write a letter of 2-3 pages. Some will write just a page, and I'll tell you, I love it. I just put it makes the whole job worthwhile, the notes that you send me. And over the years, I have come to feel that this is less a regiment than an extended family. And when you write a letter to me or a note to me when you send a check in, believe me, I read it, sometimes I read it 2 or 3 times, and I appreciate it. Keep it up. I have now an unpleasant job, or something must be done, I want to read to you the names of those of our comrades who have passed away since we last met. Boys we have learned about since, and a few of them were gone before that we did not know about. Cecil Edgewood, Frederick Jackson, Bill McCormick, John L. Rogers, Jr., Glenn Phillips, Seymour Parker, Alex Jones, William G. Mix, Walter Johnson, Edmund Oregon, I'm sorry, Ogeron, Ogeron, Maurice Gerard, Frank Prominence, Chester Jakubczak, Raymond Smith, Louis Holtzman, Jess Pettigold, Jim Cavanaugh, James Tanner, Nelson Bush. He was the one that I mentioned, his wife wrote that very sad letter that you read in the newsletter. Clifford Wilkins, who for many years was our commander, contributed greatly to our organization. William Griffith, Truman Deedy, Samuel Bearfield, Albert Broderick, Artis Jones, Clyde Dye, Donald Bennett, Elbert August, and most recent, who passed away since the 20th of last month, Floyd Shelley. Frenchie, where are you? We'll play with
So you figure 7 miles in each direction from where we are, when you got San Francisco, or you might...
On my motorhome it says it's low, 90% charge.
When it has red, that means stop.
That's right. It says red, you're supposed to stop there, guy.
You can talk on that thing, too.
Turn your steering wheel, you're fixing to hit a post. What a camera. You can tell you what, he didn't retire the camera was UPI, that's for sure.
I can't find it. It's got about 9 or
Fireman! Hey, Duncan?
get started when everyone takes a Post the colors. Please rise for the posting of the colors. Thank you. About MacArthur. We'll get more into that in a few moments. So without further ado, we want to get the information on that. The Historical Society, would you pursue this and get all the data on that gift, which we're going to turn over to the museum? Thank you very much. Give them a hand. Can you hear me? Anyone that can't hear me?